Sword jab.
Are you not entertained? Is that why you are here?
One handy dandy opening knife for one handy dandy box that needs opening. We know it has to be something from Athena herself and her claw. Sword, because it's not a common replica, and it is something that, well, it's made by Universal Swords, a company I've never bought from before, and as such, kind of wanted to see what their quality was. It's also a military sword that does not have many replicas or much representation. I'll have to look up the exact name again, but I believe it is a Danish-Norwegian infantry sword from 1701. There's the date on it, and, well, as my ancestors were Norwegian, I already have Viking swords. I decided I'm going to try to get some more Norwegian swords. And this one, you might have said, hey, that looks like a small sword hilt or a spadroon. Well, I think this is probably what we'd call a shearing sword because it sort of predates the spadroon. Interestingly, the asymmetrical guard there, aha, on the thumb side, it's less wide, and on the finger side's wider, like a saber would be. But on the finger side, it is grooved, serrated, whatever you want to call it, but not on the thumb side. I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's just decorative or has anything to do with maybe deflection, binding kind of stuff. But, ooh, there's a little, nah, that's good. Okay. Ooh, that seems to be wood core. Okay. Wood core leather covered. They went up windlass on that one. Interestingly, the throat seems to come down to about here, the metal part, but the leather goes up to here, so the leather is probably holding that in place. You can see in the, where's my lens there? You can see in there, maybe, that the wood is on the side, so you're not actually cutting metal with the blade. It has a shape, but I don't know where it ends, but it has the leather covering it to some degree, so yeah, it's about down to here is where I can see the metal ends, so that much goes on. So it's very well, like, stuck together, I guess. Pretty impressed with that scabbard for being, this is a little heftier feeling than I thought, but it is a double-edged blade. I think it's 32, 31 inch. God, that point is sharp. That is a veritable needle. Yeah, I don't see this on the web, on the page called. You can't see it on the blade that I remember, but it does have this Norwegian crest, I guess. It's pretty nice. I had it sharpened. Did a pretty good job with it. You can see the secondary bevel, which might need to be apple seated some. It's going to see maybe in the light there. Yeah, it's pretty chunky. It did say it had a decent amount of distal taper based on the web page. Feeling it, I'm not feeling it as much as the site says probably is there. So this is pretty hefty. I mean, it's like an arming sword at least. I mean, it's kind of up there. Point of balance is pretty far out too. So I imagine the originals are probably less chunky. I don't know, maybe, but that is definitely heftier than I wanted it to be. It's kind of sluggish to move. I was hoping for better, but not too bad. Not the worst I've ever felt, but it's solid. I mean, you don't hear rattling or anything. Blade is rather stiff, so it's going to thrust well. I think on the site it said like 5.2 to 2.2 mil in terms of distal taper. But if we look there, yeah, and then look here, I don't think it's probably tapered nearly as much. I mean, maybe. I imagine originals were probably lighter, but who knows? I've never held an original. I just have to guess. And the only site I can find online that talks about Norwegian military swords is a guy in Norway who collects them. He has a site on originals. Doesn't list any measurements of any sort on the site. So, unfortunately, that won't help us. the sight in question. Norwegian military small arms. I brought up the tab there on swords. What we want is 1700s to 1814 because we are a 1701. Now, if you look at the side here, you get a whole slew of different patterns, but this one is the M1701 Sword. I think that's how it's pronounced. Anyway, that's it. And we'll zoom on some of these pictures so you can see some of these originals for comparison. Now, some, like the one on top there, have the brass wrap. The bottom one, I assume the brass is missing on because I think it was regulation, but maybe it was a black handle. I don't know. I've heard the grips were painted or at least enameled with originally with linseed oil, which is not a very strong coating, but it will blacken. I imagine the modern ones are probably enamel. You can see it does have that cross section, although some of these seem to have a thinner flat than mine does. The top one has a wider flat in the middle of the blade like mine, but the bottom one's a little bit thinner. See, there's some damage on these blades, not significant, but a little bit, and their tips are blunted because they're chipped, I think, but they basically have that shape, and the scabbard does have the throat, well, shape and the throat that are under the leather like mine, so that's accurate. And you can see there again where it's under the leather, although my shape is still blackened. I imagine that one was probably originally blackened, I don't know. I see a little bit better on the swords. Like I said, that one seems to either have leather or maybe it was wire over, and that's the impression of the wire. I don't know. Maybe wires come off. Also seem to have a slightly bent pommel. Sure. But they do have the ridges and the basic shape that mine has. So I don't think they were a very strict pattern being such an early pattern, but our pattern. There's that crest again. I can put the link to this in the description. But nowhere else, because I don't know how I haven't been them after all these years. Hilson. But I do like it overall, especially as a conversation piece. Shearing sword is what I'd call it. It definitely has more heft to it than a spadroon. Definitely is going to have a much more authority in the cut than the spadroon I have, even though I can't get a good edge on the spadroon. It's double-edged. I don't really practice any kind of military saber, and I don't really use traversing footwork that much, so this probably is going to suck. Or beating the blade down. That's more how I do. That's what I'm used to doing. The only other information I could really find on the sword was from the Sword Buyer's Guide Forum article where someone had purchased the Universal Swords model like I have from, 2019. And it says here that normally the Universal Swords are kind of clunky, but it says specifically, however, an exception to this is the Gavilan's line commissioned by the now defunct Gavilan's Arms. This collection of Swedish and Norwegian swords are unique in that they're highly accurate to the originals in terms of looks and stats. So, at least when they were originally produced, they were based off originals, apparently, and pretty close. So, that's pretty good. Just looking down this, I'll put a link to this in the information section of the video. Here we have a few pictures of an original. You can see it is pretty close looking to what I have. There are the stats, blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. There's some pictures of his. Blah, 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 blah. Handling. And I agree with this. He says, this is not a featherweight epee, but a robust infantry cut and thrust sword. I like the way it handles, but please don't expect a small sword, because what you're getting will feel more like a broadsword light. I think that's pretty accurate. Mine's probably a little tip heavier than his. I think mine is got less distal taper. But regardless, this and the other site were the only sites I could find with any information on the sword. So sorry that was a bit long, but it's over. You can go home now.